Like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our Executive Director, Craig Call, and Deputy Director, Wolf Summercorn, and the Utah Land Use Institute staff for putting on this conference. They spend a lot of time and effort in doing so, and please join me in thanking them for all of those efforts. I'd like to also acknowledge and thank our speakers and panelists that you'll hear today. They've taken time out of their busy schedules to be here. They bring with them a great deal of knowledge, and we're thankful for their participation. And we thank all of you for being here, both in person and online. We're grateful for your support of the Utah Land Use Institute. Without you, we wouldn't really be able to fulfill our purpose. So thank you very much. I'd like to take a moment also to thank and honor our conference partners and sponsors. Our Institute partners this year are the Utah League of Cities and Towns, Utah Association of Realtors, the Salt Lake Association of Realtors, the Home Builders of Utah, a real property section of the Utah State Bar, and the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association. Our conference sponsors this year are the S.J. and Jesse E. Quinney Foundation, the Larry H. Miller Real Estate, Piper Sandler Companies, and the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman. Please join me in thanking our sponsors and our partners this year as well. We're grateful to have with us Daniel and Snow Productions. They'll be producing the video of this conference, and that video will be available online in a week or two if you'd like to refer back to that. Also, a few housekeeping items. If you want attorney or real estate credit, please sign up on the roster in the foyer. And those viewing the video or viewing this conference online will receive credit only by following the instructions at the end of the Zoom login that you will receive. If you're staying in the Abbey Inn, don't use your room Wi-Fi here. You won't have very good reception. Use the meeting Wi-Fi to avoid poor connections, and I think the password for that is just Abbey Inn, all small case, one word, ABBEYINN. Again, thank you for being here. We look forward to a great conference today, and I'll turn the time now over to Chris Nelson, who'll start off with the first portion of our program.
Good morning. Give yourselves a hand. I'll tell you why in a few minutes, in a couple hours, actually. Oh, I've only got 30 minutes? Okay. I'm Chris Nelson. I'm a emeritus presidential professor at University of Utah, also another emeritus professor at University of Arizona. But at Utah, I had a habit of teaching 3-hour courses. So I'm in the habit of droning on for 3 hours. I'll try not to do that this morning. I always like to come to St. George. This key at the bottom here, I was given the key to the city by then Mayor Dan MacArthur. It's the only key to the city I ever had. He probably gave out 5,000 of them, but I'm proud of it, so I show it off every time I'm in town here. I'm going to start off today talking about long-range trends for Utah, the large counties up north, the Wasatch Front counties, and Washington County. I'll talk about aging trends. I'll talk about some big, dreary national housing trends, but some bright, cheery Utah housing trends. Then I'll talk about Washington County housing trends. And then I'm going to close with an assessment of whether state housing policies that we've been having since about 2019, they're about make a difference in generating or changing the nature of housing around the state. First of all, let's talk about aging. We're all aging, of course. Washington County, at the bottom here, highlighted in red, in 1990 was a fairly young county. Then somewhere along the way, it kind of got older and older. I guess older people have discovered Washington County is a place to move and retire to. So at the top, you see the average age in 1990 projected at 2065 for the U.S. So at 2065, the average age is projected to be 46 years old. Utah, as a state, is catching up to the nation. It's going to be 45 average age in the year 2065. And Utah, as a state, by the way, is aging faster than almost any other state in the country. We're starting with a young base. We're one of the youngest states, but as we're aging, the state is actually aging faster than most other states. Utah County, towards the bottom, you see that's still a young county, will continue to be a fairly young county. But Washington County, you all know this intuitively. People are moving in, retiring, staying here when they move here, even when they're young. So by 2065, the state, the Gardner Institute projects that the Washington County will have an average age of 57 years. It's 54 in 2050. Right now, it's almost 40 years average age, the oldest in the state among large counties. So let's look at some national trends about population change and by implication housing change. I divide up the housing market into three broad buckets. Starter home households. These are people under between 15 and 34 years of age. They're starting out in life as small homes, condos, apartments, so on and so forth, starting their families. And then when they go between 35 and 64, they're in their peak housing consumption part of their life cycle, the family, the dog, the cat, everything else. They want the large yard, the large house. So they're consuming homes at a fairly large scale. And then downsizing households, those over 65. These aren't necessarily people who want to move away from their home, their large, nice home, but they're beginning to rethink how long they want to stay in their larger home. And many of them are moving down into condos or smaller homes, cluster homes, and so forth. We call them downsizing households. So nationally, between 1990 and 2020, the U.S. actually lost starter home households. We're getting older as a nation. Between those 2 years, 1990, 2020, the 30-year period, households in their peak home consumption part of their life added 24.5 million over this period. Very large, very big number. A 62% change, actually, from 1990 to 2020. Downsizing households also grew, but not so much. Fast forward to the next 30 years, 2020 to 2050, nationally, we'll be losing even more starter home households. The number of peak housing households will become almost zero in terms of change, just 2 million over a 30-year period. The downsizing households will certainly be the largest share going forward nationally. But look at the very bottom numbers. Average annual household change. A household is, by definition, an occupied housing unit. So between 1990 and 2020, we were averaging about 1.2 million new occupied homes per year. A lot of business, a lot of home building going on. But between 2020 and 2050, according to, this is from a Woods and Pool database, going forward to 2050, that number drops below 500,000 homes per year on average. The home construction industry nationally is nearly cratering as a consequence. Now, these are projections to the future. We haven't quite seen these numbers yet as we work through the 2020s, but we're going to be hitting this in a big way starting in the latter part of this decade into the 2030s. Yes, sir. Every home occupied. Renter, owner, townhouse, apartment, mansion, the White House, yeah. Yeah, sure. Would you? Oh, I'll shut up. Oh, you're fine.
Thought you were going to tell me to shut up.
Just speak up.
Thank you. So we're doing all of this stuff this great big push to increase housing, and it's going down. So you're saying this is the measurement of the demand. This is the demography,
Right.
demographics saying we're not going to need as much housing.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense because of the demographic thing.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely right.
That's going to solve the housing crisis. Is we're not going to need.
There are some really good scholarly articles coming out now saying, just wait.
Yeah.
We could pull through this. Just wait. Not in Utah, though. Right. Yeah. A couple of good friends of mine published an article last month, actually, maybe 2 months ago now, saying that the U.S. now has more homes than it needs by the year 2050.
Yeah.
But we just have to wait. Yeah. Now, these are other numbers. This figure shows between roughly now and 2040, more than 1,000 counties in the U.S., including a couple in Utah, will have more empty homes in 2040 than there is demand for those homes. Following on this theme, where the nature of change is such that in these 1,000 counties, 1,100 counties or thereabouts, there will be more. There'll be more sellers of homes than buyers of homes by 2040. Mostly rural, yeah. And these are, you can see Atlanta, Georgia, that's all white. You see the Texas Triangle, Tucson, Austin, Houston, Dallas, those are all white counties. The red ones are mostly rural, but there are some that are urban counties, especially in the upper Midwest. But not so many of those counties here in Utah, none in Arizona where I live now. But that's an artifact, though, because we have physically large counties. You look towards the east, and we have very small counties, so it's actually a numerical aberration. But let's look at Utah, the big cheery numbers for Utah. Between 1990 and 2020, we were averaging 17,000 new households and new occupied homes per year. Going forward, we're looking at almost 30,000 demand for new occupied homes per year. We're not doing that. We're pretty far below that. I don't know what the numbers are this year or so far this year, but we're not there. Look at the age breakdown. The peak housing household demand is very large. It was large in the past 30 years. 60% of all new housing demand was for the peak housing households, and that'll be still more than half going forward to 2050. So we are in a very different space here in Utah. We are aging, as you saw earlier. Some counties are aging much faster than other counties, but we're still a fairly young county with a lot of robust demand for housing as a whole, and even housing for starter home households, much more so than the nation as a whole. I'm going to skip that number. So this chart shows some of the future trends. Well, I'm going to go back. So I tell my students, don't put busy charts up for people to try to understand. Only I do that, right? You see in the 2020s, the highlighted red numbers on the far left and the far right is Washington County. These are the peak housing demand years for the state and for the county for the next several decades, actually. So we've got to find a way to pull through these next few years in the 2020s, because then demand softens, and that's the upper bracketed area where we see housing demand falling from 28,000 per year down to the 25,000 per year. For Washington County, you see the same trends. And then we'll have a dip, and then we'll come back up towards the end of the forecast period with more housing demand. And this figure sort of shows what's going on. But let's go to let's break out the for all the four large Wasatch Front counties, Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah, and then Washington County here. let's look at the nature of change for the starter, peak housing, and downsizing household numbers, looking back, looking forward. If you look at the bottom line for Washington County, you see that the going forward, clearly the largest share of demand is for meeting the needs of the uh, older household, over 65 years of age, by a large margin over the other counties. Two-thirds of the housing demand from 2020 to 2050 will be to meet the needs of the household over 65 years of age. These are likely people moving in from other states or other parts of this state, retiring, but also people are already living here, staying here, and retiring here. Uh, these are very important numbers to plan for. But I want to point out something that is a trend that we need to pay attention to. The U.S. policy towards immigration has changed. It's changed a lot in just a year. If it continues to be the policy of the U.S. going forward, many of the housing projections that we've come up with, we have to throw out the window. For example, just between 2023 and 24, and then 24, 25, we see for Utah, in this chart here, the number of foreign-born people moving into the state has dropped by about 80%. What color is for? That's the blue. Yeah, the net international migration is blue. Net domestic migration is the small gray. You can hardly see it. And then the Utah is orange. So we're having kids here and they're staying here. And so we are a much better area in Utah because of our age and because our population is staying here. That's the orange. And that gives us a lot of stability. But a large share, about 40% of our annual average housing demand, is attributable to foreign-born immigrants. And we see just in the past 2 years where that has really taken a turn downward. It may be a blip. It may be just 1 or 2 or 3 year blip and it comes back up again. We don't know. But if it is sustained, we will have a very different housing market in a very short period of time than we have had in the past decade or two. Just something to pay attention to. Okay, I want to talk about the effect of Utah's housing policies on the nature of housing supply in the state, in the 4 largest counties up north, and in Washington County. Here's a list of the things that the state has done, not even a full list. It's just a highlights list of the policies the state has done since 2019 up to this year. Now, later on this morning, we'll have a review of the housing policies that have been adopted by the state this year. And there'll be other sessions talking in more detail about many of these housing policies. And I'm not going to go through these, just to point out that outside of California, so this is something that people don't realize. Outside of California, Utah has passed more laws for advancing home ownership, expanding the supply of housing, forcing local governments to expand the supply of housing. We've done more in this state outside of California than in any other state. And nobody knows about it. Nobody except you. We know about it here, but it's sort of below the national radar scan. I don't know why. So I'm using some federal data, some census data to figure out the extent to which these policies are associated with the nature of housing change. The problem, of course, is that when you adopt a housing policy, it takes a long time for the policy to make a difference. Housing occurs almost glacially. The typical home built will last 100 years or more. We only add about 2% to our supply of homes any given year. It takes a long time for the market to shift in housing and actually in any other kind of development. So And then the problem is that even if we adopt policies, to what extent did they really make a difference? Maybe the change would have come anyway. And maybe the policy actually gets in the way. Who knows? I don't think so in Utah, but I've seen this in other states where a well-meaning policy actually undermines the purpose of the policy. So, but let's go into some of the analysis and throw out questions if you have any questions as I go through this. So, to what extent have we seen an increase in, well, the census declares them as duplexes, 2-unit homes, but accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Utah leads the nation actually in allowing by right what are called internal ADUs. If you have a house, you can put in a brand new residential unit inside your house, and that's an ADU, and that's allowed by right in Utah. And by the way, Utah goes further than other states in exempting homeowner associations from prohibiting that. That's a very powerful law we have in this state. Another thing I'll ask is, to what extent are we adding to the supply of what we call middle housing? I wrote a chapter in a book some years ago that was called Missing Middle Housing. If we all remember 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, even I can remember that, we had a large supply of plexes, duplexes, threeplexes, fourplexes, low-rise walk-up apartments. We had a nation filled with these things, but we lost a lot of that over the past 50 years or so. We're now missing the middle housing, that is the supply of homes for starter home households or downsizing households or other groups. So we're going to classify the middle housing as townhouses, accessory dwelling units, or duplexes, and any unit within a structure of 3 to 19 housing units. That's the way the census organizes their data. And then, of course, we'll look at the extent to which we have larger apartments being built in this state and in this county. And I'm using the 2019 census and the 2024 census. The 2019 census gives us a snapshot in time before these housing policies were adopted or took effect, and 2024 gives us a kind of a sense of the extent to which these policies are kicking in and making a difference. So here's another complex chart that I tell my students to never do. Only I get away with it, right? So at the top we have the state. Let's focus on the highlighted brackets. So between 2019 and 2024, the state increased its housing supply by 13%. That's a lot relative to the nation. For detached homes, only 8% of the detached homes increased supply by only 8%. Look what happens in the townhouses. The number of townhouses in just these 5 years statewide increased almost half. That's a big change. Now, numerically, they're small. Let's say, does the hand go up? No, okay. Duplexes and middle housing, about 24, 25%. These are statewide numbers that are fairly impressive. But let's go down to, and you see the Wasatch Big Four, I call them the Big Four, Weber, Salt Lake, Utah, and Davis. Let's go down to Washington County, the highlighted in green. Washington County, the number of homes added in those 5 years increased by 19%, larger than the other counties, larger than the state as a whole. We increased our supply of detached homes by 10%. Not a large number, but it's numerically it's not a large number. But look at the number of we more than doubled in 5 years. We more than doubled supply of townhouses in Washington County. That's a very big change. Duplexes or ADUs, 67% increase in just 5 years. Look at the 20 plus unit, the larger apartment units, 150% increase in supply in this county in just 5 years. 1.5 times more larger apartments in 2024 than in 2019. Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious why they put together duplex and an ADU, as she said earlier, girl, and can't be sold. Why are they buying?
If that's what I'm doing. The census will still count an internal ADU as a residential unit. And how do they classify it? They put it into the duplex because it's part of the larger structure. It's just an artifact. Did I see another hand? Yes. Yep.
The very bottom one attached, but townhomes are attached, duplex are attached. What do you go up there? Any example of attached? It's no townhome or retail.
Attached is anything. So what I would call a plex, a duplex, threeplex, fourplex, apartment building, condos. It's two or more units that are. They include townhouses.
Okay, so that bottom line includes some of the.
Yeah, there's some double counting here. Yeah, yeah. I should have mentioned that double counting. I'm good at double counting, by the way. Yes, sir.
Piggybacking off of her question, could you separate duplex and ADU, or the data that you're getting not distinct?
It doesn't distinguish.
So you can't distinguish.
I can't. No. Yeah. Good clarification. The census has limitations, and the census data does not allow us to separate that out. Now, individual states, I don't know what Utah is doing, but individual states are tracking ADUs. Washington does, Oregon does, I think California, I know California does. I don't know whether Utah does or not. Any more questions about this chart? This chart says a lot about what's going on in Washington County. You're leading the nation, or you're leading the state in terms of the distribution of the supply in terms of the attached homes and the middle housing homes and the ADUs and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned earlier, townhouses in this county have more than doubled in just 5 years. And the ADUs duplex and ADUs have increased by 2/3 in 5 years. The middle housing piece, which includes the townhouses, duplexes, and the smaller apartment units, they've increased by about half in 5 years. That's a large change. And as I mentioned earlier, the units in larger multifamily structures have increased by 1.5 times in just 5 years. You have led the state in broadening your supply of housing across the board. Well done. Congratulations. And I'm done. Any questions, though? Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all very much.